Okay, this is the second part to my video lecture on the Orton-Gillingham approach. And hopefully you have a lesson plan template and a student recording sheet in front of you, as well as the course manual, because I'm going to be making reference to the sheets covering the essential elements as well as the primary skills to be taught in every lesson. So make sure you have those things handy. We're going to look at each section of the lesson plan, talk about what each section in brief, what each section covers, and then just how those essential elements and skills are embedded to make the Orton-Gillingham approach evidence-based. And then you have your student recording sheet next to you, and you can see what your students are looking at as you're teaching your lesson. So the old review will cover what you taught 2 lessons back, as well as anything your student had difficulty with in the previous lesson. So again, that's where your diagnostic and prescriptive piece is going to come in. Anything that your student had difficulty with, you're going to want to cover that again in the old review. So the old review, you're just simply going to display in front of your student what you taught 2 lessons back. You're going to ask your student what that phoneme ruler pattern is. If you've got a key word, you're going to talk about if you introduced a phoneme 2 lessons back, what is the word placement of that phoneme, beginning, middle, or end of a 1-syllable word? You're going to talk about if it's a rule or pattern, which rule or pattern does it follow? And again, if you look at your student recording sheet, those are the things that your student is going to be expected to jot down on his student recording sheet. And then you're going to give your student a few words to spell. Okay, so 3 or 4 words to spell. And then there's a part there on his recording sheet that he can jot those words down that you have dictated him to spell. Now, if your student had difficulty with anything the lesson before, and you do have to review that, you can just grab a blank sheet of paper and do a quick review, just like you did the review on, what you taught 2 lessons back. You can follow that same structure if a student had difficulty in the previous lesson with a concept. You can just grab a blank piece of paper and just say, what is the phoneme? What is your key word? Where does it come in a word? Is it voiced or unvoiced? Does it follow a rule or pattern? And then give them a few words to spell, okay? Same format, same structure there. And then the new review is what you taught 1 lesson back. So whatever you taught 1 lesson back, that's all you're going to cover in the new review. So again, what is this phoneme ruler pattern? Where does it come in a word? Most often in a 1-syllable word. When we talk about word placement, we're talking about a 1-syllable word. And where does it come in a word? Is it voiced or unvoiced? What ruler pattern does it follow? And then you're going to give your student a few words to read and a few words to spell. And again, you're only covering in that new review what you taught 1 lesson back and nothing else, okay? So the old review is what you taught 2 lessons back, as well as what your student is having difficulty with. The new review is only what you taught 1 lesson back. Okay, and so that's what you're going to cover there. Now that review time, if you look at the elements, the essential elements, you're looking at it's phonetic and alphabetic, it's cognitive, because you may be talking about rules and patterns that are pretty complex that your student has to be able to learn and then apply. It's repetitive. You're constantly circling back for review. So you see how those elements are embedded. Even in the review time, you have several of those elements embedded right there. It's diagnostic and prescriptive because you're taking those areas of weakness and applying those to the old review and making sure that your student has added reinforcement there. The next section is the visual drill. And that's where you show the student the card or the symbol, and then the student says the sound that that symbol represents. Remember the primary skill, that's symbol to sound, and that's the visual drill. And the visual drill, if you look at your sheet talking about the primary skills, the visual drill is the basis for reading. So it's so important that you're going through the visual drill with your student. And the visual drill will have phonemes that your students have already been introduced to. So there's no surprises. This is just added reinforcement. This is just added repetition. You're going to show the card. The student's going to say the sound that that symbol represents on the card. And that's the visual drill. The primary skill there is symbol to sound. And that's also an essential element would be that it's phonetic and alphabetic. You're connecting a sound with a symbol, phonetic and alphabetic. Okay, that's the visual drill. The auditory drill, the teacher is saying the sound and the student is repeating the sound and writing that symbol on his paper that that sound represents. That's the auditory drill. And if you look at your primary skills to be taught, that's the third primary skill, sound to symbol. And that's the auditory drill. That's the basis for spelling. And again, it's phonetic and alphabetic. Okay, do you see how all of this is flowing? And then you have the blending drill. The blending drill is taking those phonemes, those symbols, and building. So you're taking individual phonemes and you're building to make a word or to decode a word. And that's the second primary skill, that's reading or decoding. That's also synthetic. If you look at the primary skill, that's synthetic. You're synthesizing, you're building, you're taking individual phonemes and you're building to form a word, as in decoding. Okay, so that's the blending drill. And then you're going to introduce something new to your students. So you see that on your lesson plan template. You're going to introduce something new to your student here. You've got some steps to follow when you're introducing something new. And we'll cover that in the module as well. And you should have a PowerPoint presentation covering all the steps to introducing a new phoneme ruler pattern. You're going to follow the suggested order to present phonemes, rules, and patterns, and you're going to follow that scope and sequence to introduce something new to your student. And there's 15 steps to follow to introducing something new. And that section of the lesson plan is cumulative. So here you're going to take what you're introducing new and you're connecting with information that you've already taught your students, and you're developing that cognitive filing system. That's so important as your student is developing literacy skills and is able then to see the bigger picture of our English language. Very, very important. And so that's introducing something new. It's also cognitive and phonetic and alphabetic, and you're having them read a few words and spell a few words, so it's synthetic and analytic. So you can see how all of these essential elements are embedded in every lesson. You also have a spelling section. Here is where you're going to either, depending on the level of your student, you're either going to dictate words to your students, maybe small phrases, or if your student is ready, sentences. You'll dictate sentences to your students. So that's the spelling section, and that includes a conglomerate of phonemes, rules, and patterns that your student already knows. You're done with the introduction of new section, and you go down to the spelling section, and again, this covers a conglomerate. A compilation of what your student already knows is going to be covered here in this spelling section. You can give them words to spell, you can give them phrases to spell, or you can give them sentences to spell. And Here you are, you're embedding the fourth primary skill. So the auditory drill is the basis for spelling, and then you come down to that spelling section of the Orton-Gillingham lesson plan, and that is actual encoding. Okay, so you can see how it builds. And then you have the reading section of the lesson. So you'll want your student, again, depending on the level of your student, you have them read some words, have them read some phrases, some sentences, even some passages. That's your end goal. You want them to be able to read passages. And the primary skill there is number 2. They're actually decoding or reading. And you can see how the essential elements of it's multisensory. So you have the visual drill, auditory drill. You're incorporating the kinesthetic pathway, because when you introduce something new, you're going to be using a tabletop for your student to trace on, or you're going to use sand or rice or a tack screen or something tactile, or you're going to ask your student to skywrite a letter, anything that incorporates the kinesthetic pathway. Very important that that is embedded and included in your lesson as you're planning for your students. And so you can see how it's cognitive and repetitive and cumulative, and you can see how it's structured because it follows the same format. It's sequential. You're moving, you're taking that scope and sequence, and you're moving in a sequential order in order to present things to your student. Okay, so and then we talked about diagnostic and prescriptive. It includes all of those essential elements in every lesson. So when you've completed your lesson and you have the red word section or the non-phonetic words section, those are words that just simply have to be memorized. They're non-phonetic. They can't be sounded out. They don't follow the rules that govern our language. So you need to you've got a list of red words, and we'll talk about the red words in a different module that your student will memorize and learn those. And that's where you incorporate the red word section of the lesson there. And then down at the bottom, you see assessment. That's where you're going to just jot down your diagnostic information, areas of weakness, areas of strength, and what can you add to the next lesson, the subsequent lesson, to enhance the learning for your students. So that is a quick, and you can see if you've made reference as we kind of worked through this very quickly. And again, you can pause this, rewind, go back. I know I'm moving very quickly, but hopefully you followed along also on the student recording sheet, so you can see where the student is writing down what you're asking him or her to write there on that student recording sheet. So at the end of your lesson, if you're working with a large group of students, you can pull those student recording sheets and you've got that diagnostic information right in front of you. So important. So that is our part 2 of the introduction of the Orton-Gillingham approach, and hopefully it was helpful to kind of walk through this a bit with me. And as you work your way through the module, it will become more and more clear, each section of the lesson, and we have some video demonstrations throughout the course. And also under each module you'll find emails that you can contact us if you have any questions. Our staff here at the Orton-Gillingham Online Academy are very available, and we want to answer your questions, so please don't hesitate to reach out.